I will not come in wrath. This is the origin story of God's mercy, intertwined with the history of a rebellious nation, a terrible ruler, and of all things, a troubled relationship. To understand the breadth of God's unconditional love, I want to talk about Gomer and Hosea and their marital challenges. The great theologian John Shelby Spong used to tell this story in a way that allowed people to enter into it and to identify and to know it. I've updated some of his words that were recorded very generously by the Reverend Don Hutchings. So take a little breath here. Travel with me back, 8th century BCE, and imagine all of the gossip and tongue wagging when the staid and respected holy man Hosea married Gomer, the party-loving youngest daughter of the old merchant Dibalim. Gomer was drop-dead gorgeous, known for her style and her dancing. Hosea was older and kind of boring. He was a holy man. He was so proud, though, of his young bride. He vowed to do all he could to make her happy. And at first, things were great. Hosea found a new lease on life. He went to Gomer to countless events and basked in her popularity. That hectic social pace, however, only increased over time. After a year or so, Hosea began to yearn for some me time. Tension crept into their relationship. Once, Hosea wanted to leave a party sooner than Gomer, so a compromise was arranged. Hosea would leave, and some friends would escort Gomer home. When people saw this, tongues wagged even more. Time passed. Hosea chose to stay at home while Gomer went to parties without him. At first, she went with friends, and eventually, she went alone. Now, an unaccompanied woman was almost unheard of in that context, in the ancient, brutish society they lived. A lone woman was vulnerable and undefended. This was especially so with Gomer, who was well known as the life of any party. One night, Gomer did not return home at all. Hosea searched for her, but she had vanished without a trace. Now unburdened by her more sedate husband, Gomer pursued a life in the fast lane. Years passed. She began to feel worn out, and her popularity faded. Once she had run with the social elite, but now she ran with whoever would have her. Men who once supported her gladly soon began to expect more in return. They forced her to sell her body to survive. Finally, she realized she was being trafficked. Gomer was sold as a slave to a family that treated her horribly. Through all the spiraling years, Hosea kept up his search for the woman he had married. He never gave up. He never stopped loving her. And knowing the ways of his world, he searched slave markets, the only place he could think of as a likely destination. He witnessed the riffraff of society catcalling and commenting on the slaves as they stepped on the block. And then, one providential afternoon, Hosea's eyes spied his beloved Gomer. Her eyes were bloodshot and her hair was matted. 15 pieces of silver, he called from the back. The traders looked at one another. That was the price offered for healthy young male slaves. Who was this old man who didn't know any better? Hosea approached the block, and he reached out and took Gomer's hand. and he led her gently past the hostile crowd until the catcalls and their words all faded in the distance. He took her home and informed his household that Gomer, this once slave, was actually his wife, the center of his affection. That is God's love for us, like the love Hosea had for Gomer, a love that is born out of long-suffering pain. God's love is not something we can earn. God's love is simply a reality we have to enter. God's love is something we must live to understand. And God's love cannot be destroyed. God's love is waiting for individuals, for communities, for churches, for nations. The union of God with the people is a marriage that must be saved. God would save us if the choice were God's to make. But God's arms wait wide with mercy, and it's time to come home. Amen.